You are listening to the Superfreakmedia Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, please be sure to show your support and follow us on our other social media platforms. Check out the links listed in the description of this episode to find out more. Thank you.
So, a trigger warning before this month's episode. We will be discussing some heavy and hard topics, including sexual assault and sexual violence. You have been pre-warned, but we do it with taste, and we will be discussing it with the sincerity it deserves.
I mean, I would like a council estate version of this, maybe where Brenda's down the high street and she offs Paul with a leg of lamb or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, I do feel like that
Iceland,
would be good.
Yeah. That's why Mum's going to
Iceland.
Hello and welcome to the Bear Queer Podcast, the podcast where two homos called Liam decide to fall in love with the wrong people, fuck up their lives, and make men suffer for the crimes that they deserve. Well, it's a very special episode this month. We are joined by Zoe Cutter. I am Liam J. You should all know that by now. If you don't,
where have you been?
Get a life. Yeah. Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you today?
Good. Tired.
Tired.
Warm. I was outdoors until 3 a.m. watching a meteor shower. So yeah, I made plenty of wishes last night. So if none of them come true, I'll be absolutely fuming.
I love that for you. I do. That sounds lovely. How are you doing, Zoe? Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm fine, thank you. I'm excited to join you guys. I think it's going to be it's going to be good fun. And apart from slowly cooking away in my living room, I'm absolutely fine.
Yeah, we are recording this on an incredibly hot weekend again, so we've got some hot topics of discussion, and it's incredibly hot. So
yeah.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
Some bunnies are being boiled tonight.
Probably by accident. It's probably not even intentional.
So this month we will be discussing one of my favourite movie tropes. We'll be discussing all things Femme Fatales. So unlike previous episodes, we won't be discussing one film in particular. Just like our Scream Queens episode, we will be discussing in depth the whole trope of Femme Fatales and some movies that follow those archetypes, and our thoughts and musings on them, basically.
Yeah, honestly, I'm so excited to record this episode. When you suggested the subject to me, I was like, that's definitely a slice of the genre we've not yet tackled, and I thought, who's more perfect to talk about this with than you, Zoe? So just giving a bit of context as to, I suppose, how I know you. Zoe was my lecturer in college for film studies, and hands down the most incredible lecturer. Honestly, I had the most amazing time while I was at college learning about stuff, and you actually introduced me to the archetypes and the characters that I talk about quite a lot in horror now, but in particular Femme Fatales. So thank you for your service.
Well, I'll say you're welcome in advance, but yeah, we'll see if I actually contribute anything useful, but I'm happy to discuss, this STALK character. I think it's a great kind of character type to discuss, especially around gender.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting as well, because we're going to have a look at, I think, 4 films in total on this episode.
All right, that's good. Okay, that's good. That's good. It's enough slices!
But there has definitely been somewhat of an evolution, I think, within the character, obviously from its roots, maybe back in the early days, but particularly even with these more modern examples, there has been a bit of a change with these characters and I suppose attitudes towards them. So I think getting into the the meat of it, as you like to say, Liam, I do have the Oxford Dictionary definition of what a femme fatale is.
You do? Oh, Helen is the enemy.
So I don't mind reading this to you and seeing if you guys 100% agree. So a femme fatale literally translates from French to mean fatal woman. It's an attractive and seductive woman, especially one who is likely to cause distress or disaster to a man who becomes involved with her.
Good for her.
Incredible. I mean, other names she goes by are man-eater or vamp. I think her origins lie particularly in noir films, and I think there has always been a history of demonizing sexually powerful women.
All the way back to biblical days when Lilith was shunned for being a powerful woman.
This is it. But Zoe, you introduced femme fatales to me. I know there were some examples, particularly in noir, like classic noir films, that we kind of like looked at. So is there something about this character in particular, or this archetype, that you enjoy?
So I would say what I enjoy about these stories is that that involve femme fatale characters is that they tend to be allegorical. They're meant to serve a political moral message about kind of what gender norms are and what happens if you transgress those norms. So I think it's important to say at the start that, especially if we link it to American cinema, in particular, femme fatales have existed since 20th century in kind of the arts, in literature, but in particular in relation to American cinema, they did really sort of become a stock character in the 40s and 50s in noir. And as you mentioned from the dictionary definition, they use their feminine sort of wiles, they use the sexuality to gain power over men, which usually involves them doing their bidding. Often it's persuading this poor unsuspecting guy to knock off their husband for them, so I definitely mentioned films like Double Indemnity, or anything with Barbara Stanwyck in. She's fantastic. But I would say, if we just go back a little bit earlier, a film I would mention briefly, which is brilliant to have a look at for a very early sort of prototype of a femme fatale, is actually a film called Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, which is a silent film. They don't even have character, they don't even have names. They have they're meant to represent universal types. So you've got the husband, the wife, or he's sometimes called the man, and you've got the woman from the city. And it was made in the late 1920s with F.W. Murnau. You'll love this because you'll remember Murnau from Nosferatu.
Yeah.
And in this film, she plays the woman from the city is a flapper. And she's essentially trying to persuade this man to murder his wife. And
as you do.
Move to the city. Yeah. So I think even though the origins of the femme fatale, generally are linked with, in American cinema, the 40s and 50s, I think we have to look at the way women's behaviour changed in the 20s and the flapper movement. And reasons behind that was, we had post-World War One, so lots of people, specifically if we talk about America now, lots of people died in World War One, but more people died of Spanish flu. So a long life wasn't guaranteed. And as a result, women in particular started to reject the Victorian ideals of family and motherhood. They cut their hair shorter, they wore looser clothes, they went out, and prohibition as well, they were drinking and they were smoking and having a brilliant time, but all of that it sounds great. But all of these things and this idea of a good time girl meant that they were rejecting the traditional roles of women. And I think that from that we then start to see kind of the femme fatale in cinema, where essentially the key things about this is that they do reinforce heteronormative values. That the femme fatale is meant to be a cautionary tale for men to not get involved with a woman like this, and in a way it was a cautionary tale for women, that because what happens to the femme fatale character is that generally they meet a sticky ending. You know, they get arrested or they get killed. So essentially, if you behave like this, if you transgress social norms, you're going to end up, you know, paying the price. So I do think that there is a lot in here about women kind of not conforming to gender roles, and if they don't, then you know that there is a price to pay.
It's a very interesting concept, and I mean, opening it up to both of you, do you see this figure of the femme fatale then as empowering, or do you see it as somewhat limiting?
I think it always depends on the way that she's written and who is directing her. So I always think of in Gone Girl, I feel like that's, even though she's supposed to be villainized, for me that's like, if you look on Twitter, all the gays talk about Gone Girl as the biggest good for her film. And I do believe that that's the way that she's written, whereas, you know, ideals towards like someone like Alex Forrest from Fatal Attraction, and people just like it's both fit the same archetype, but one of them you're like, she's nuts, whereas the other one you're like, actually she's got her head screwed on. So I think it is all a matter of perspective. I'm always going to fight their corner because I always feel like men deserve every single come up and come into
men are pigs.
I probably one of my favorite archetypes, one of my favorite like subgenres of femme fatales is a Black Widow. I love a Black Widow. First fell in love and found out about the Black Widow archetype when I watched Addams Family Values as a child, and I wanted to be Debbie Jelinski so badly, but because of her character, I then, you know, went and saw a lot of other films that were a lot more serious. But yeah, I always do think it's a matter of perspective who's writing, who's directing.
In terms of the films then that we're looking to cover, we've got an exciting variety. We're going to take you guys all the way from Fatal Attraction all the way through to Gone Girl, so we've got a more modern day kind of interpretation then of this character then as well. So I don't know if we want to kick off with Fatal Attraction because we've got a lot to cover on the episode. Asking you guys then, how did you first watch this film? Because I think it's, out of the examples, maybe with Basic Instinct as well, which is another film we'll discuss, I think it's probably the most infamous and one that still bleeds into pop culture even now.
I mean, it coined a term that is used in everyday vernacular nowadays. The term body boiler stems from that film. I first found out about it from, there was something on Channel 4 that was like 100 scariest moments, and it must have been when I was like 10 or 11.
I think I found out a lot about a lot of films from that program.
And that scene was up there, and I was like, oh, I didn't want to watch it because I was like, I don't want to see a bunny die. I don't want to see that happen. But then when I saw that it was Glenn Close, and it's weird for a child to say that, like, as a child, for me to have idolized Cruella de Vil in the live action. But in the live action 101 Dalmatians, her performance and the fashion of Cruella was made for me.
You're actually wearing half white and half black today, so is this your little homage to Cruella?
And the grey hairs are coming through. So that's how I discovered the film, because I was like, I've got to watch it if Glenn Close is in it. And then my auntie had it on VHS. And she was like, "Oh, you don't want to watch it? You don't want to watch that? That's not for you." And I was like, "Okay, I'm watching it." So, watched it, and I was quite scared.
Yeah, I do think it is very, very scary in places, and I think this is why
the third act
it fits into the conversation, particularly obviously with this being a primarily horror podcast. I do think it is very much a horror film. I mean, it is described online as a thriller/drama. But I would also add horror to that, because
it's a very menacing film, isn't it?
Oh, for sure.
It's that constant low level sort of tension and sense of threat and danger throughout the film.
Absolutely. I mean, well, giving an overview of the film, Fatal Attraction is a 1987 film. It's directed by Adrian Lyne and stars Glenn Close as Alex Forrest and Michael Douglas as Dan Gallagher. They're pretty much the two main players in this story. And I think what you touched upon as well, Zoe, about femme fatales really existing as a figure that represents the consequences maybe of what happens when you transgress these societal boundaries. I think a very easy reading of this film is that you see Michael Douglas's character Dan as this yuppie hetero guy who's got everything. He's got the perfect family, perfect job, perfect career, but he's still able to be tempted by this force of nature that is Alex Forrest, and then has to live with the consequences. And that living with the consequences comes with potential threats of death. So I think it's very easy to look at this film and think that it maybe demonizes women, particularly single and sexually active women. I would argue, though, my reading of this is that I don't feel like Alex is the villain at all in this film. I think very much Dan is the villain in this film. But again, I think it maybe depends on perspective.
But Bunny Boylan aside, we can if we take that out, you know.
The killing of bunnies and violence. We'll get rid of that. She was just having a bad day.
I feel like it also is dependent on the audience on who's going to be villainized, because I, going into this film, was already immediately like, what's he done to deserve it? And he told me what he did. But what I found interesting about this one is none of the others really go into any sort of like, well, they do and they don't, but this one really emphasizes like mental health being a contributing factor to Alex's like actions, which as it gets, you'd think that conversation would then progress with later films, which it doesn't really. Everyone becomes a bit more of a stock character. But what I really enjoyed about it is it really did give Alex some meat. She wasn't just like an enigma. We actually learned quite a lot about her, which is great. And I think Glenn Close gives maybe one of the performances of a lifetime in this.
Absolutely,
I think it could have tipped into the realm of camp really easily, and it tiptoes that line a lot, but she's got such a gravitas to her performance that it's chilling. It's so chilling.
I think what you said, Zoe, about, Zoe, you mentioned a very valid point, I think, before we jumped on the podcast, because I do think it does tiptoe that line with camp, but I think the menacing side of things is maybe what keeps it from teetering over into silly. You also made a really valid point, though, Zoe, about the fact that you didn't necessarily think that this film or this character was a femme fatale, and it did link in with those mental health issues.
So she's definitely been written about as a femme fatale over the years, and there's been a lot of studies and around the psychology of her character, and initially she does kind of demonstrate some of those traits. She does seem to what do femme fatales want, and their ultimate goal is independence, and she's an independent career woman. She's 36, she's not married, and she's not settled down, and she seems to be, as she said, she's seems sexually free, and she does seem to be actively pursuing this relationship with Dan. However, the thing that marks her out as different is that femme fatales, and I guess we'll get on to this with the other films, so often the women show psychopathic traits. Alex does not have psychopathic traits to me. She's too impulsive, she's too unstable. Recontextualizing the film now, looking at her behavior, there is an early suicide attempt where she tries to prevent Dan from leaving her over this weekend affair. It's quite clear that she's a disturbed woman. Since then, psychologists have kind of said she's a classic example of someone who has borderline personality disorder, a delusional personality, clearly is depressed and suicidal. And I feel that for those reasons, she isn't a classic femme fatale for me as the film develops. What she is to me is a disturbed, woman, and it is, nevertheless, it's a cautionary tale of who you get involved with, and not really knowing you know, what you've let yourself in for, I guess. But I think one thing that is worth talking about with this film is that you've mentioned the bunny boiler scene, and that leaked into you know, culture. It's a phrase that people might even use and don't even know where it comes from now.
Yeah.
100%.
Quite old. And I think growing up, it was a film I just grew up with, because I grew up in the 80s, and it was definitely a blueprint for you know, what happens if you don't get chosen and you're not loved, you know, that people kind of, and still it is in culture, that if you're not settled down by a certain age, it's why not, what's wrong with you. And Alex definitely seems to reinforce, well, there's clearly a reason why she's kind of unstable and single, because she's the way she is. But there's the angle of the ending, which I think is worth discussing, which is that the ending where, you know, she's crept into the house, and then Dan finds her trying to, you know, kill his wife, and there's that iconic kind of jump scare where she leaps back out the bath and he shoots her.
Yeah.
That wasn't the original ending of the film.
No.
Okay.
And the original ending. No, so throughout the film, there's references to Madame Butterfly. That being her favourite opera, and she even comes to visit Dan in the office, where she wants to apologise for her behaviour.
Is this where she's got the incredible leather jacket on? Because we just need to take a moment for that leather jacket.
I'm glad you bought that
jacket. Yes, Queen, skinny legend, Versace boots, the house down, slay queen.
Can you focus?
Sorry guys, sorry.
No, it is a fantastic jacket, I'll give you that. And she offers it to take him to the opera to see Madame Butterfly. And the original ending of the film would have tracked the story of Madame Butterfly, which is about a Japanese woman who is married off to an American serviceman, but she's quite happy with this arrangement. He goes back to America and abandons her. She has a son. She spends a long time waiting for his return, so it's about unrequited love, really. And then when he comes back, he's coming for the son, not for her, and he's brought a new wife with him, and she says she agrees to see him one more time, let him have the son if she agrees to see him one more time, and then before he arrives, I think this is the right ending, she kills herself. In the original ending of Fatal Attraction, it ends with her cutting her throat to the soundtrack, you know, the score of Madame Butterfly. And for me, that was a really powerful ending, and if you haven't seen it, it's very much worth watching. And that was the original ending. They reshot the ending that then became the iconic one with him shooting her in the bath 6 months later, and Glenn Close was really not happy about it. She kicked up a lot of fuss about it, because she felt like it just kind of diminished Alex's character to being a psycho killer.
Absolutely.
She was outvoted, and in the end was told, look, you're going to have to suck it up. And I think that it would help reinforce this idea that Alex was in many ways a tragic character.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I also read about this because I think it was following a test screening that I think they then reshot the ending. And my big takeaway from it was the fact that obviously the ending we get, only Alex is punished for these transgressions, and that's a big problem because originally when she did commit suicide, Dan, I believe, was then imprisoned because obviously he was being held responsible, so he did lose his family. He was also then being held responsible for the fact that he'd ruined this woman's life, whereas instead she's drowned by Dan, she turns into some kind of Michael Myers supervillain, comes back to life, and then gets shot by Beth. So that's then she's now becoming like this embodiment of conservative family values and literally shooting the person who's threatening their marriage, when it takes two to tango, literally. Like she should have shot him as well. Like if that's her attitude.
I'm always really like, no matter how many times I watch it, I get to the end and I'm just like, oh, for God's sake. Like,
I mean, I do like the ending. That's not to say I don't. I do love it, and I mean, it is iconic when she comes out of the bathtub.
Absolutely.
But if you haven't seen the original ending, it's worth watching because it definitely changes the tone of the film and how you see Alex's character, and it really does align you with her, and you really feel that empathy for a woman who yeah, you know, clearly had very serious issues.
I think it is a shame, yeah, that we did move away from that. And I mean, again, going back to the context of the film, this was the end of a decade where the AIDS epidemic had kind of broke out. Obviously, people were worried about extramarital sexual activities anyway, and now there is this risk that obviously something could literally kill you if you did engage in that. So again, I think she was very much a representation of that side of things, but for heterosexual people. But then there was escalating rates of divorce at the time, so people weren't happy in their marriages, they were getting out. There was Reagan era politics still rife. There was a lot going on, and it's a shame, I think, that they did have this opportunity to actually make people responsible and stick that ending, and instead we are left with something that gives us this bunny boiler.
I think that's something to do with the director, because the director's known a little bit, because the director's known to be like, I feel like it was heavily like every film I've watched by them, I've just had a quick look to look through what I've seen, and every film I always feel like there's a well-written female character in there who then completely gets sidetracked. Like even something as like silly as Flashdance, and I know that sounds silly, but just finding out that it's directed Flashdance, and I'm like, okay, because like,
I mean, a bit of a departure, isn't it? Again,
they also did 9.5 Weeks, so it has a thing for steamy films by the looks of it. 9.5 Weeks, Indecent Proposal, Lolita, Unfaithful, and there's something coming up called Deep Water.
I think that's being kind of tagged as the next kind of erotic femme fatale kind of
and
thing,
it's also somebody who's no stranger to the genre as well. Stars Michael Douglas, who seems to enjoy these films where and then is married to somebody who I would say embodies a real life femme fatale.
You reckon?
Well, she is. Well, I always see her as Velma Kelly. Like, I don't see her in any other roles. So, and that's a femme fatale. One thing, we briefly touched on it, and we tried to stay on topic, but I really do need to talk about Alex's wardrobe for a moment.
Thank you.
Alex's wardrobe choice is absolutely incredible. I mean, obviously, there's the whole... She's always wearing white, apart from one scene, but I love, like, the black leather coat dress in particular. But our first introduction to her when she's at that gala, that ball that they're at. Oh my god! I think
she's incredible. She's absolutely incredible.
The way that she's dressed in this, I really like that she looks successful as well. Like her apartment, I liked that she had a really good career. Her apartment was gorgeous. I want that apartment so badly. Apart from the weird,
she needs a new bathroom though.
Yeah.
Definitely.
One thing that terrified me throughout this, watching it recently, I was like, I can't remember if the dog survives. Like, so I had to quickly Google. I was like, I know there's a rabbit, but I need to make sure that.
Does this keep you up at night?
It does. I'm really glad that somebody made that website where you can just quickly check to see
if the dog survives.
I need to write this down.
I've just watched Prey.
Yeah.
And the first thing I did.
Oh my gosh.
We'll talk about it.
The nicest helper. Yeah, I love Prey.
But I had to Google first because I was like, this dog is beautiful.
So someone's made a website.
Yeah,
and it's like it's called.
Did
like,
you not know about this?
No.
Yeah, it's called like doesthedogdie.com, and you just put the movie.
What it's called, or
It's brilliant. I use it for any film now where I see a dog come into it. Like, I need to know.
I do think it makes or breaks a film, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think if you know the dog survives, then you're like, okay. But I think animal killing is also a theme of these films we're discussing today, unfortunately.
Well, getting slightly back on topic, not just Alex's wardrobe, but Alex is probably my favourite character out of the films we're going to discuss today. But again, I think that's because she feels so real. She doesn't feel like she's like, apart from the end bit where she is a little bit superhuman, but she doesn't feel I do appreciate how well-rounded in some sense she is. She feels like, when watching, I remember watching that 100 Scariest Moments, and most people who were interviewed about it were men, and they were all like, oh yeah, but it made me think of who am I going to take home with me, like, all women are crazy, and I'm like, Okay. If you think all women are crazy after watching one film,
I think that's all it takes, isn't
you
it? You
really need to reconsider your life and the choices that you've made there.
I think, like you said, she maybe because as well the film is quite balanced, because it kind of she just gets scenes on her own where the one where she's just staring into space and sat in the dark, just flicking the lamp on and off.
Beautiful.
And with no dialogue, it's a very quiet scene, but you do have some understanding that this woman's going through something, and
absolutely.
You don't see her as calculated, as manipulative. You see her as a woman in distress. So I think that definitely helps humanize her. And she also kind of is shown to have a fair few flaws, and when she sends him the abusive tape messages, I think that there's definitely something to pick up there if we want to talk about the queer angle, because it seemingly feels like that there's not much there. But one of the things she does in her kind of abusive messages is she attempts to emasculate Dan by she says, "I bet you don't even like girls. I bet you're a and, we wouldn't hear that in films today, but it's a fairly sort of common phrase that they might have used in films of this day, and it's used to try and emasculate Dan and humiliate him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's probably the most hurtful thing she could say to someone who's got that big of an ego and is so hetero.
Like the career that he was in and the people that he surrounds himself with. Absolutely. It was one of the most chilling scenes for me is the fairground scene.
I was just going to say the bit of a roller coaster. Jeez, Louise.
It sounds awful, but I'm always expecting her to yeet the kid off the roller coaster or something. I think it's scary, but it's also really beautiful. You see the joy on her face as she's just thinking of how things could be, and it's the way of her picturing how life could be, and it's such a tragic scene because you are constantly expecting her to be she's crazy, she's going to do something, but it's a scene that makes you realize that she's not evil.
Exactly.
She's not an evil person.
She's just desperate, incredibly desperate, isn't she?
An evil person would have yeeted the child off the roller coaster.
Incredible.
I think again, I would say that this is further evidence to say why Alex isn't a classic femme fatale, because femme fatales reject the nuclear family construct, and actually what Alex desperately wants is her own family. It's just that Dan wants to not have that with her. He wants to stick with the family he's got. So she is a threat to his nuclear family, but Alex very much wants a family. She wants to conform, and again, as I said a bit earlier, it is I feel like she became a bit of a cautionary tale of growing up that's the woman you don't want to be. And there's that great line in the film where she tells him she's pregnant. She says, "I'm 36 years old and this could be my last chance to have a child." And I think growing up, as a female, you think, oh my God, women have got a really short shelf life. And if you don't kind of, settle down, get married and have kids, and you don't even question whether that's actually what you want, then, this is what could happen. This is how your life.
It's the expectation, isn't it? Absolutely. And I still think even in friends today, I see them kind of having their plans and being like, oh, I need to do this by the time I'm 30 and everything. It's I don't know. It's a shame, really, because I do think there's a bit more freedom to life. But
absolutely,
hey ho.
That forced idea of heteronormativity is now, unfortunately, bleeding into the queer world. I got asked the other day when I'm going to settle down and get married, and I was like, don't ask me that question.
I was going to say, what?
And and somebody was like, oh, I can imagine you with kids, and I'm like, but why?
You don't.
Why
need
are
them.
you that's for the straight people to try and that's their goal. We don't try and bleed that into our society. That's the one of the biggest reasons why I love being gay is I don't have all that forced I need to do this by a certain time, I need to do that. So that's another reason why Alex is an icon. She might want it, but she doesn't get it, so I feel like she's teen queer.
Team queer. Team queer.
I was going to say she has permission to say the slur, but she didn't need it. She just took it and ran away with it.
Anyway. Yeah. Incredible.
I think we've come to a really nice close on
Fatal Attraction.
Out of the films we are discussing today, I think Fatal Attraction is possibly my favourite. I think just to watch it, it's beautiful to watch, and I think that's not just. I think that mainly comes from you've got some powerhouse performers in there. Also, it was really nice to see Jane Krakowski in there, and for 1 second, like young Jane Krakowski. And it sounds gorgeous as well. The score to this film is absolutely stunning. But that's like a common theme, and
there was something though about these films, and I mean this is kind of a whole, and obviously I think with Gone Girl and Fincher later on he has his own style, but these films in particular, there's something about them that I love because they were still on film. They still had like this grain and this rawness to them, but then also the soundtracks again I think are killer on all of these, and I think they play a major part in it, in kind of the atmosphere.
That Madame Butterfly, score it makes it, as I said, what could be, make her a very one-dimensional character. She is just a psycho. It actually does give her a more rounded kind of characterization, and you see those moments of tragedy in there about her character, and I think it's great that. If you haven't seen that alternative ending that was intended to be the ending originally, then you've got the opportunity to rediscover that film again, and it could change the way you see the characters entirely.
Yeah.
Perfect. I mean, I think, like we said, moving on then naturally, I think the next film, keeping maybe Michael Douglas in the cast, I think we should move on to Basic Instinct, this time in 1992, directed by Paul Verhoeven. This is described as a neo-noir or an erotic thriller. And I've seen a lot in reviews and obviously write-ups on this, and I think this perfectly explains this film. It's described a lot as being quite sleek and quite sexual, and I think that perfectly encapsulates what this film is about. So again, how did you guys discover this film then? Was this in a similar sort of instance to Fatal Attraction, or
mine was a really stupid way into this film. Mine was there was a parody film of like this sort of genre starring Emilio Estevez. I can't remember the name of the film, but there's a parody scene of the infamous like Sharon Stone sitting there and crossing her legs, and I was like, "What the hell's going on here?" So then my mum was like, "Oh, it's from a film called Basic Instinct." So I was like, "Oh, okay." And she was like, "You can't watch that." I was like, "Why?" She went, "It's a sexy film," and I was like, "Oh,
it's a sexy film."
I want to watch a sexy film. What film did I watch? I watched Catwoman starring Sharon Stone.
2004 Halle Berry Catwoman.
Yeah.
Which I will literally die and defend that film because I've got to say I do love it.
Okay.
I absolutely love it. Michelle Pfeiffer is my Catwoman, but I do love the Halle Berry Catwoman.
Michelle Pfeiffer is my favourite actress.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got a good outfit in it, but I think that's about all I can say.
Girl, the shade of it all.
Yeah, because I watched that, and then I was like, "That's who Sharon Stone is." And the only time I heard Sharon Stone's name mentioned was in Scream.
Yeah. Okay.
So I never got why he did that, and now I understand it after watching. So I was probably like mid-teens when I first watched this film.
Okay, what about you, Zoe?
So again, I think it's like you have those films that you just are aware of, and you've seen. You're aware of iconic scenes from them, but actually if you sit and think about it, you're probably not sat and watched it all the way through.
Yes.
And I think I actually, again, because I kind of grew up in the 80s and 90s, it was a film I was long aware of, but I don't think I properly watched it all the way through till many years later. But I was absolutely aware of, the interrogation scene with the leg crossing, and was aware of Catherine Trammell's character, and this idea of this woman being like a very dangerous character. But yeah, I think I didn't actually. It's one of those films where it tricks you into thinking that you know it, you've seen it, but you haven't actually. It's just that it's so much part of our, pop culture. It's just ingrained.
I completely agree. I mean, confession on the podcast, I actually watched this for the first time through this week because, again, it was a film, like you said, Zoe. I've seen it in so many different parts. Like, I've seen the opening scene, I've seen the infamous interview scene, I've seen like so many elements of it, and the parodies in pop culture are everywhere, particularly with the interview scene. So it was kind of a film I felt I knew all about it, but I hadn't actually seen it. And I will say, I was really, really pleasantly surprised. Like, I think it kind of exceeded expectations because there is a whole lot.
What you liked about it, and what maybe kind of came as a surprise.
I think I absolutely loved the style of it. I think Sharon Stone was incredible. I think I kind of thought I knew where it was going to go with the twist or the ending, but I kind of loved how open the ending was. I mean, I will say I've obviously not seen the sequels or anything like that, so I don't know if I should or where the story goes kind of when the credits roll. Fair enough. But yeah, I thought it was just a really, really well made film, and it was like a really nice time capsule as well of what I thought the 90s would have been like to be like an adult and a successful adult as well in America. I thought it was really, really entertaining, and actually, again, quite violent. I think I was surprised at how violent it got. It was an interesting one. I definitely won't look at Ice Picks the same way again after this film. That's for sure.
So, should we give a brief overview of what it's about then?
So the film basically tells the story. We kind of get the opening scene of this blonde woman straddling this man, who then gets violently offed with an ice pick, and there's kind of this ritual almost to this murder. He's tied to the bed with a white silk scarf, and it's, I suppose, again, that's always like a concern, I think, for everyone. Obviously, sex and the act of sex is such a vulnerable thing, and then for that to be the moment that something like this takes place is absolutely shocking. But ultimately, after we've had this opening kill, the investigation is being led by Michael Douglas's character, Detective Nick Curran, and he's convinced Sharon Stone has kind of done this, but he's treading the line with danger. He's flirting with her, and he's got a psychiatrist that he's seeing because we find out in his backstory he's maybe shot some people he shouldn't have shot. There's a whole thing there going on.
Yeah, that's good.
So you kind of realise he's maybe not the most reliable protagonist as well. So it's very much a film that's kind of has a lot of openings, and you kind of think one thing, and there's a lot of red herrings, and ultimately I kind of don't want to give it away for people if you haven't seen it, but
definitely not.
There is a conclusion, and maybe a twist to the ending, which I did enjoy. But it's essentially following this investigation, and we're introduced to Catherine Trammell's kind of a very sexually open person. I would say she's bisexual because she does have female and male lovers. Another reason why I was really keen to include this on this podcast was the fact I think it was dubbed as a very anti-homosexual and anti-women film when it came out, and I believe it was protested quite a lot, when it was released. Like, a lot of people didn't want other people to see it because the suspects in this film of the murders are all bisexual, so they all have kind of dabbled in the world of non-heterosex. So it's I kind of get why it's problematic. I don't know, I just can't deny the fact I think Sharon Stone's just an absolute icon.
If you ever want to read something incredible by Sharon Stone, there's a really good article that she did with Vanity Fair. She wrote an article about how this film kind of like made and broke her at the same time in Hollywood. There's a line from it that I really love where she talks about how she was Predator directors were describing as the most difficult woman in Hollywood, but this film, she took it so seriously. She fell in love with the role, and she hates that she says it's more than just a peak up my skirt, people, which it's become known for. It's great. It's 2021, March 18th, 2021 when it's written, and it's really nice because Sharon recounts her career before and after, and because this is, when you say Sharon Stone, this is the film.
This is the film, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I really like how she describes how much. So yes, it made her a household name, this film, and it did kind of like kickstart a career she was trying to get up and running. But the sad part of it being that everyone then was just saying, "Oh, she's just a pair of nice legs."
That's the sad side of this, is the fact that I think that's where the negatives come in particular, because it did obviously make her, and when you do think of Sharon Stone, this is the film, but at the same time you can see that it did maybe completely ruin things for her as well. I mean, I don't know if it was that article I read or whether or not it was an interview, but I know that she struggled with more serious castings a lot after this, and then due to that and then health issues, her career didn't really go in the trajectory I think it should have, because I think she's incredibly talented. But I don't know, at the same time, it's an incredibly powerful scene. Like, she is literally in a room full of men and completely dominates that room. She's completely in control of that interview. She smokes when she wants to. I think it would have been better if it was done without that maybe having to happen. But would it have been as iconic? I don't know. What
when you say without that happening,
I think, if you do, it would have been interesting to see. Thing. Yeah, if that scene had have happened, and maybe, I don't know, it was a peek at pants instead of full nude or something. And I know, obviously, there's kind of the rumours and things, and I don't know if she's kind of said, I think she said on record she wasn't aware that it was being recorded, and she feels it was like a bit of a betrayal. I think the DOP said you can't wear like white underwear because it'll mess up the camera. So she thought it was completely innocuous, when actual fact it's very much a big part of the scene. But then at the same time, I mean, I don't think she is also nude in a lot of the rest of the film. So I kind of don't think like it's the only example in that movie. So it was like just a quick decision. I just hate the idea of someone having to go through something like that and it not be their choice. That bothers me. But it would have been interesting to see if that scene would have been as powerful without that included.
So I think what I would like to kind of talk about, and then kind of we'll circle back round to that scene, is that I think we do need to look at the context of the time period, because this was a time, 1992, where there was relaxing censorship. So you got that gap between the 1980s and video nasties, and then the Basic Instinct fits between that period of all the video nasties of the 80s, and then actually leading into hardcore porn. And it's a step away from that, but it's kind of, it's a film and it's a mainstream film, but it's incredibly erotic and explicit at the time. Paul Verhoeven, I think, is we have to think about the director, especially when we're talking about gender issues, because they are ultimately the captain of the ship, and Paul Verhoeven's a very divisive filmmaker, and I still feel very conflicted about that film and his other work. On one hand, because if we take two of his other films, Showgirls,
a masterpiece.
He also did one in France a few years ago called Elle, which is described as a light-hearted rape revenge fantasy film. And you
light-hearted?
Paul Verhoeven, I'm sure you've probably seen, is it Starship Troopers?
Starship Troopers.
Total Recall as well.
But he does have, I know, but the creatures in it are like, they do freak me out. They're pretty scary.
They're incredible.
But Paul Verhoeven has in his body of work, there is a lot of scenes and sequences that involve violence towards women, and some of those sequences have become problematic, which we'll come back to with Basic Instinct. But this is what makes him, someone that is going to divide people. Some people think that what he does is clever satire and it's a feminist commentary on the world. But Variety magazine described his work as demented, sex-positive caveman feminism, which I just thought was a fantastic
caveman feminism. I'm gonna get that tattooed, I think. I love that.
Because he really does play with that line of consent and cat and mouse power games and who really is in control. The Basic Instinct really is an intriguing film, because you can't really come down one side or the other. You can see the merits of the arguments. Going back to the interrogation scene, I do like that scene because of, you know, the fact that she is in the spotlight.
Yeah.
She doesn't follow the rules. They say she can't smoke. She says, are you gonna, you know, arrest me for smoking? And it really does emphasize, as you said, that I counted, there's 5 men interrogating her, and she refuses any representation because she said, basically saying, I don't need help. I know I'm in control. And also what it does is it turns on its head something what happens earlier in the film, which is I'm hoping, I think it is earlier in the film, scopophilia, which is the psychoanalytical concept in film, which is scopophilia is like the pleasure in looking, you know, at someone, sexually, either, you know, in a state of undress or in the process of having sex. So, in a way, the audience is taking part in scopophilia when we're watching her doing things. But also, there's a scene in the film where Nick's character is basically following her and stalking her in a way, really. And he's stood in the grounds of her house, and the lights are on, and she's undressing, and she's unaware she's being watched. And I think that then you go back to the interrogation scene, and she's turned it on her head, because there is still this element of scopophilia where she's being watched sexually, but she's in control of it. And really emphasizes that it's her in a male-dominated world. And I do quite like that scene. But as you said, the context of then finding out that she wasn't aware that they were filming that, it does change the way you see that sense of power and control, doesn't it?
Well, in the article I was discussing, she also talks about how when she was testing for the film, Mike Douglas refused to test with her because she was a no one and wouldn't do that. And I really feel like, although it's a blatant commentary on like snobbery and Hollywood elitism, but also I feel like it plays really well in the film. I like the chemistry between them because there's something lacking there, and I feel like them not testing together although it was a very rude thing to do, and you know, I'll never work with him, so Michael Douglas for that. But
you heard it here first, folks.
Turn off on my door.
But it's I feel like it then added something to the film, because there's this, even though there's this like pure sexual chemistry between them both, there's such a disconnect somewhere, and I feel like that
it's uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. But talking about the interrogation scene, I really like it, because that scene, you can just really feel her tugging at strings. You can really like just imagine her standing above the whole thing as like a little set and just marionetting them all. Out of the characters in this as well, I really feel like she is probably the most chilling and the most sinister, because she's also probably the most, she knows exactly who she is, what she wants, and she's a very good, she knows other people. She's brilliant at being able to read every other character in this.
Play them off each other, manipulate. I mean, I like the comparison to her literally being a puppet master, because the thing is obviously as the film goes on, we do find out that she knows a whole lot more about Michael Douglas's character. She's probably researched him and known about him for months. She's premeditated this murder literally in a book. And I think also what's funny is the fact that we then get the mirror of this scene later when Michael Douglas is being interrogated, and he says the same thing about smoking. So it's kind of almost like she set the stage, and we get these repeated moments as well of her having sex and us not knowing whether or not she's going to strike. And I mean, I think it's done like 2 or 3 times in the film, and you still don't really know right up until the end whether or not she's going to do something. So I love the not knowing of it, but I love how calculated she is. And I agree, Liam, I think she's by far the most predetermined, I think, out of maybe all of these. I'd maybe even say more than Amy and Gone Girl, actually.
Well, I think that, you know, when we get on to talking about Gone Girl, you know, a lot of this is why I think, you know, Amy's character gets some kind of sympathy and also like admiration, because some of her actions are seen as a response to patriarchy, and the more subtle ways that you know, misogyny plays out in a modern world. But Catherine Trammell in the film, played by Sharon Stone, is undoubtedly a psychopath. So her psychopathic tendencies are that, you know, she's shown to be very cold and emotionless when she's been informed at the beginning, when we first meet her, that her lover's being murdered. It almost looks like she's subtly smirking. She's deeply manipulative, and she plays people off against each other, like her girlfriend Roxy against Nick, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a minute, because that's another angle. But she's and definitely she shows that she has there's a concept in an essay called this, again linked with Femme Fatale, Spider Woman. It's in Janie Place's article, I think, called Women in Film Noir. And the Spider Woman's infamous for carefully and dubiously weaving their webs around unsuspecting men in order to get them to do their bidding. And when he repeats that line of "what you're going to do, charge me with smoking," it's clear that she has sort of infected him, and he's under her sort of, you know, control now. So I think it's quite good for that, and it definitely goes back to, you know, what Paul Verhoeven does is play with that cat and mouse sense of, you know, who's in control, and leaving it kind of very much in the hands of the audience to decide.
Again, I'll keep linking back to this article because I want as many people to read it as possible. She talks about when Sharon Stone, when she was first went to watch the film and she saw herself, she didn't realise that she could be, that she wasn't. This is the first time she said that she saw herself looking that beautiful, which like, I know. And but she said she was really happy with her performance, because she said in her performance, she was channeling all the rage that she felt against all these men in Hollywood who were trying to tell her what to do. And she says that she, like, in every scene, she was picturing each man she was in a scene with as someone who had told her, "You're never going to make it. Women can't be sexual beings," and all this. And I really love the idea of, I'd love to be in her head just for that one moment where she could really feel that liberated watching herself on screen. Because I feel like we talk about these films, and as much as we talk about the big issue with these films is if a woman takes this role as a femme fatale, often in Hollywood she's either then typecast or she's laughed at in a kind of a way. Like I think Glenn Close may be the exception, because, you know,
Glenn Close, because she's frigging Glenn Close.
But that's the treatment then of Sharon Stone post this film, as people only saw her as this. She was just a pin-up. She was just something for people to stare at. She was sexy. Nobody bothered to, well, not say nobody, but the majority of people didn't bother to think, "Oh my God, like, look past the sex in this film." Look past the visual and the aesthetic, and look at the performance she gives and the subtleties. You mentioned the smirks that she gives within this film. They're so calculated. They're bloody brilliant. She gives a performance of a lifetime in this film, and unfortunately, the way that Hollywood works is they just chew up women for this one thing, and then I couldn't give a about them afterwards. It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah,
I think,
it's a shame.
You know, it's like you said about it. She's channeling all the rage, you know, into that one role. I think she's fantastic in this role, and you know, the character she plays. You know, she's rejecting traditional roles, and she's wealthy, she's successful and independent, and you know, like men kind of are shown to try and do, he wants to try and domesticate her when they start this sort of pseudo relationship. And he kind of twice, I picked it up when I rewatched it, talks about them settling down and having rugrats
kids,
and the second time, without even wondering whether she wants them, doesn't ask, it's an assumption. And I really feel like he's trying to domesticate her. And I like the second time he says it, she says, "I hate rugrats," and I quite enjoyed that part. But the other thing I like about it, and again it goes back to psychoanalytical theories, that it's packed with phallic imagery, you know. So femme fatales are always smoking, and it is seen as, you know, the way that, because femme fatales are meant to be very visual, they use their their clothes, their hair, their makeup to draw in men, and the smoking was always seen as drawing attention to their mouths, looking seductive, and also it's meant to be a phallic symbol, and the ice pick as well, very clearly is in there, and this idea of her subtly taking down patriarchy, I quite enjoy. I think it is kind of something to get onto about, though, some of the negatives of Catherine's character, and that she is kind of shown as a bit of a stereotype of a bisexual, that she's shown as being promiscuous, always kind of hungry and for sex, quite murderous. And the woman that she is in a relationship with, Roxy, is shown as being she's killed her brothers, she's a man hater, and she definitely falls into that trope of psycho lesbian who is killed off, and there's a great scene in the club where essentially Nick kind of manages to take Catherine off kind of Roxy, so it does kind of suggest that she can't compete with a man. That
I do think it is somewhat problematic. I think the fact that literally all of the people who we seriously think are capable of murder in this film are the queer people. So I think again this is something I'll touch upon with Single White Female as well. I think the context of the time, I think we were starting to maybe see more of the representation coming through of queer people. It wasn't necessarily doing much for our community, but it was definitely kind of starting to be introduced. And I mean, at the time, this must have been incredibly risque, even the idea of it. A pattern though that I am seeing is the thing is, and I mean this is, I think, is with all of the films, all of these women, in order to be this sexually progressive or active, have to be successful women so they can stand on their own. It's kind of like there's almost like this reinforcement that they've all got to be career driven, and then sex is almost an afterthought, as opposed to it's a weird dichotomy, I suppose.
I think it goes back to, again, the idea that the origins of the Femme Fatale was, that they existed in a time period where they were transgressing, traditional roles in the nuclear family, and that what they wanted more than anything was independence of men. They wanted their own autonomy, and Catherine, it takes that, to the extreme.
I mean, I would like a council estate version of this, maybe where Brenda's down the high street and she offs Paul with a leg of lamb or something. Do you know what I mean? I do feel like that
Iceland,
would be
That's why mums go to
Iceland. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there's potential. There's potential.
Yeah, I think the one thing that makes me, uncomfortable about the film, which again goes back to Paul Verhoeven being a bit of a problematic filmmaker, is kind of Nick's in this on-off relationship with his psychologist, the therapist that works for the police, Dr. Beth Gaynor, I think her name is, and we then even find out that even she's had a tussle with Catherine Trammell back in college.
I mean, who hasn't at this point? It's very that.
I know. And there is this really difficult scene to watch where he I think he goes to her apartment. They begin kind of this sexual encounter, which then becomes quite sort of rough and aggressive, and then quickly sort of escalates to Nick essentially bending her over this sofa and forcing her into sex when she says no, but then afterwards they're then shown in this sort of post-coital sort of embrace with her going, oh, you've never been like that before, and that's so problematic, because it kind of suggests that she didn't want it, but actually really she did. Also suggests that he's getting like this and his behaviour is escalating because of the impact of meeting Catherine Trammell, that in some way Catherine Trammell is affecting the way he's behaving towards Beth. So ultimately it makes him less sort of responsible for his behaviour. But date rape, kind of in the idea of date rape, if you'd already consented to having sex with someone previously, or you were dating, then that just didn't exist back in the early 90s. No one would say, oh my goodness, I've just witnessed a rape scene on film, you would just think, oh, that was a bit iffy, or possibly not even that. So I find that scene, looking back on now, recontextualized is a little bit problematic. Well, very problematic to watch.
Yeah, there was an essay I read that labelled Trammell as the living embodiment of a male castrated society, and I think it is funny. Well, not funny. That's probably not the right word. It is very on the nose. I think that once he's had this encounter with her, he then does have to assert his masculinity by literally forcing himself onto a woman. And I think watching it now is very different than the attitudes probably would have been at the time when it came out. I mean, none of these films go without their problems. I think they're all problematic and interesting in their own ways. But I think that's why it's good to discuss them.
Yeah, and it's also we're watching these films that are written and directed by men. So no matter what happens, we're seeing these characters through the male gaze, no matter what. It's always worth remembering that. Like, I would love to see a remake of Basic Instinct through like a female gaze.
I thought we were going to get an introduction of someone there.
Well, I was going to say, and I think there's only one Catherine Trammell out there right now, getting pissed off that a man has not texted back through Microsoft Excel. That's something Catherine would do. And the only one and only Kelly Rowlands would be able to fit the bill.
Friday!
Kelly Rowe. Incredible, yeah.
I think ultimately where kind of Catherine Trammell's character sort of surpasses the original stock character of a Femme Fatale is that she gets away with it.
Yeah.
And that is not something that happened in the past. As I said, it was very firmly an allegorical sort of, tale about if you transgress, there will be punishment. Yeah. And I think that ultimately is the catharsism, is that, she's done all this stuff and she's going to get away with it. And that I think is what does make the film more interesting and more complex in as far as looking at her as a Femme Fatale.
It is very, very interesting. And I mean, I'll probably put in a pin, I'd say probably in this one then, and then moving on. I will leave on the note of saying, if you guys, I don't know if either of you have actually watched this. Have you watched the documentary Don't F*** with Cats?
Yes.
Yes, it's great.
I mean, the influence then that you see that this film had in real life is absolutely shocking. And I mean, I won't go into details because, guys at home, if you haven't watched this documentary yet, it is incredible. But Basic Instinct does indeed play a big part in that real life horror story.
Yeah.
So I suppose moving on then. So we're still in 1992, but this time we're moving on to Single White Female. Now this is a film that I was really, really excited to bring this film to the table, because if I'm being honest, I mean, I watched Basic Instinct obviously properly for the first time this week, and I'll probably say that's my favourite out of the four we're discussing, but I do love Single White Female. This is described as a thriller or a psychological thriller. It's directed by Barbette Schroeder, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, and it stars Bridget Fonda as Ali Jones and Jennifer Jason Leigh as Hedy Carlson. I will also give a shout out to Peter Friedman as Graham Knox, who is the upstairs gay BFF that we all want in our lives.
Have you seen the sequel to this one?
There's a sequel?
I don't think I have seen the sequel.
It's called Single White Female 2, The Cycle.
Hasn't it got different characters though?
Yes, it's shocking. It's shocking. It's
as in shockingly bad.
Not even so bad it's good. It's just like, oh.
Why did we need another one?
It came out like a decade later as well.
Okay.
Is it even worth hate watching?
I'd say it's worth watching with maybe a bottle of wine or two, so you can at least laugh at it.
Okay.
And then maybe a few shots.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, where does she post the listing somewhere different? Is that on like Facebook Marketplace now, or like what's going on? This was another film I think that is maybe more on the problematic side of things. I very much think that there's joy to be had by watching it, but this one I think definitely leads more into the lesbian phobic side of reading when you look at this film, and maybe characters coming to terms with their sexuality and who they are really as people. I'll just jump in and give an overview again of this one. So Ali is a successful fashion designer, businesswoman, entrepreneur. I mean, she's got a whole lot going on. She's developing.
I think she's a computer programmer, isn't she, or something?
Computer programmer, absolutely. I was going to say she's got some weird Microsoft Paint clothes program thing going on. I mean, it was the early 90s, so we'll forgive them. She's seemingly got the perfect life. She's got a boyfriend called Sam who seems wonderful, and at the start of the film they seem very happy together. She's got a rent controlled apartment, she's got killer style, but he seems to be doing the dirty on her, and she finds this out in incredible fashion through the answering machine.
This is for Rachel, you big, fat, white, nasty, smelling, fat bitch.
Which, I mean, I love how camp that is. In order to maintain this lifestyle, she realises that she doesn't necessarily really want to be on her own in this apartment, so she puts an ad out in the classifieds, and in this incredible montage gets some quite kooky characters come through to potentially share this flat with her. She takes up a lodger called Hedy Carlson, who's played brilliantly by Jennifer Jason Leigh, and at first there's quite a really nice, innocent and platonic relationship forming between these two characters, and she very much does build her life around her flatmate post breakup, but shit hits the fan, and then we start seeing that maybe Hedy isn't necessarily what she says she is, and we go back into thriller territory, and we've got a femme fatale on our hands. So it's a lot of fun. I'd probably say I think it's very stylish. To say it came out at the same time as Basic Instinct, I don't think it was as successful, and I think it's a hard act to follow or be in the shadow of, really. But I do love this film a lot. I think it's very, very. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Of all the films we talk about today, it's the one I watched. The earliest I discovered this film because it was on TV.
Yeah.
And I remember I used to stay up quite late without like my mum or anyone knowing, and just watch random films on TV. And I think it was on like Channel 4 late at night.
Yeah.
And I remember being in school and I was freaked out because I had a teacher who had like a short choppy bob as well.
That is incredible.
But was that on the good side? Did she remind you of Bridget Fonda, or was it, No.
She was full Hedy.
I was like, she's going to try and kill me. I didn't trust her from that day on. Yeah.
What would have been funny or sus is if another teacher then got the same short bob.
Or I came to school and I'm like, we've got the same haircut now.
I bought you a puppy and I've got the same haircut. Yeah, and this is a film that if you check on that website, you might be disappointed because, spoiler alert, the dog doesn't survive in this movie. It's very, very, very sad. But what about you, Zoe? How did you get into this film?
Again, I would say probably very much like described with, Basic Instinct. I think it's one that, because it was made around that same time period, like I said, it was on TV a lot, and was aware of, and became, it's another phrase, as we said, that we use, in pop culture and say, I'm not going to go all single white female on you, and it becomes shorthand for a psycho woman, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is like a film which, again, for me personally, I'm not sure. I think she does have some of the characteristics of a femme fatale, but because, again, I feel like she's a different kind of version of a femme fatale for me, and because she's more a cautionary tale towards kind of women about this lesbian threat, I don't feel that she conforms to the traditional femme fatales are a threat to the nuclear family and men directly, but indirectly she sort of is, because she is a threat to the men in the film. What she lacks for me more than anything, I think, is she's far more impulsive. She's probably more on the lines of a sociopath. She's not really as in control and manipulative as Catherine Trammell or Amy Elliott in Gone Girl. She's much more impulsive, and so I think she deviates a little bit there. But I think it's a little bit like Fatal Attraction. I think that there's a lot of underlying menace in the film, and then you get some, you know, pretty shocking moments. Like I don't think I ever saw stiletto heels in the same way ever again after this film.
I mean, it's a standout for me. The fact that I don't think
we've got to discuss it now.
we've not yet spoke on this podcast about a film where someone gets impaled in the eye with a 8-inch stiletto. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah. It's I mean, the shoes are incredible as well. They weren't an old maiden type of shoe. They were, definitely, they were great shoes. Yeah, I probably agree with you, Zoe. I do think this is more akin to like Alex Forrest in Fatal Attraction. I think now that I've looked at the definition of femme fatale, I do think she maybe sits outside of the confines of that, and I think there's a lot more going on mentally, and it being more of a psychological thing as opposed to it being manipulative. I mean, I think it's easy to read this film and not see it with the lesbian undertone, because I think when I first watched this when I was younger, and again, I don't know if this is just me being younger and naive, I think this was the one I saw first out of all of these films as well. I actually got onto this through my mum, because my mum was like, "Oh my god, this film's great from the 80s. You need to watch it, even though it's the 90s."
It's the turn of the 90s, though.
Yeah, we'll forgive her. We'll forgive her. I think you can read it as it just being, because the film opens with this image of these twins at a mirror, and we do find out as the film goes on that Hedy did have a twin sister who died. It's alluded to, obviously, that she had very much something to do with that, but you could read it that she wants Bridget Fonda's character Ali to fill that void and maybe become her twin sister, which is why she's kind of making herself look like her so much and acting like her. But on the flip side, you could very much see it as kind of some lesbian obsession and something else going on. So I think it's open to interpretation. I also don't think that Hedy's desire for Ali is 100% delusional. No. Although it's never explicitly said that either of them are lesbian, and obviously Ali is very much heterosexual. We're established that she's in a relationship with a man and then goes back to that relationship. She very much relies on her, like, very strongly. When she first moves in for emotional comfort, physical comfort. I mean, they literally fall asleep on each other.
I think it's more than that. Like, I think so. This was written by Don Roos, who is a gay screenwriter. I was reading quite a lot online that a lot of people that like this film had the same sort of point to make, which is that they would just love to speak to him and find out what he actually did intend, because this film could definitely be perceived as being very much a queer baiting film, because it kind of does lots of things in the film where it is kind of suggesting that there is, you know, a gay attachment between them, but then right at the last minute it sort of sidesteps it and then makes it about, you know, she even says, "Oh, Hedy's got survivor's guilt," and it then kind of infers that what she really wanted was a replacement for her twin. But it's crap, really, because when she first moves in, essentially it sets up at this sort of blossoming relationship, and it kind of, there are scenes in the film where it's like it's a meet cute where you know, she fixes the sink, they're bonding, they're going on like dates together, so it is establishing that there is this kind of connection between them that is more than platonic. And at one point, you know, when she's trying to pacify Hedy in her rage, she even kisses her on the lips, you know. So the other thing about it is that, you know, again, Hedy is kind of seen as she's very jealous of when Ali reconciles with Sam. She's shown to be kind of a bit of a man hater. She sees Sam as a threat, and she tries to draw kind of Ali away from Sam. And when she gets the dog called Buddy, you know, the dog is meant to be a stand-in for a child. So you know, Hedy is trying to create a family with Ali, but she ends up coming off as, you know, the psycho lesbian that ultimately will go punished. But then at the same time, it goes back to this, you know, it's survivor's guilt. She lost the twin, and I mean, I kind of get it, because it's a socially conservative time still, and this would have been made to play to a largely sort of heterosexual cisgender audience, so you know, he knew probably he couldn't get away fully with writing a gay story. but it's like it kind of swings from one side to the other.
This is what I love about these films that we're talking about today, is because the audience that they were made for is not the audience who largely consumes these films now. All these films are now like, they're very successful, so to call them a cult film, but the way that it's got a cult following amongst queer people is very different to those who like really enjoy it, who are like the cishet society. I remember when I spoke about this film in uni, and there was a piece, because I did theatre, and there's a piece that I wanted to direct. It informed me of the queer people in the room, because they were like, I love this film, I love this film, I love this. Yeah. And then I was like, we've got one thing linking us all, and that's what it is. And I think what gets me about this is, again, when we look at the film, I've recently discovered that it was based on a book, so I need to read that now. All these films are like warning you of the dangers of stepping away from conformity and trying to step away from those families. One of my favorite scenes in this is when Hedy makes that phone call and blackmails that arsehole who tries to sexually assault.
What's his name? Is it Maxwell or something?
Mitch Meyerson. Mitch Meyerson is played by Stephen Tobolowsky.
Yeah, Toblerone.
Stephen Toblerone.
But I really, when she makes that phone call and engages in that blackmail, it gives me chills.
It's the switch up, isn't it? And I mean, it's kind of like those are the moments that stick out in this, because on paper, a lot of the decisions that Hedy makes are kind of nice. Like, she is genuinely like doing nice things. I mean, it's not unreasonable for her to move in a place and say, look, just don't move me out again in a few weeks when you decide you want this man back. And I don't know, she can tell that obviously Ali is hurting, so she's trying to be there for her, and then she's just thrown to the curb. I mean, I don't suggest murdering people, but I can see why she's pissed off. Like, I do get it. I mean, one thing obviously we touched upon is the fact that this film, it could be queer coded, I suppose. Like, you could read it as either or. One thing I absolutely do love about it, though, is obviously horror movies, as a well-known trope, would kill off their minority characters very early on. And I think this was kind of an expectation we had when Ali then does go to Graham upstairs and go, do you know what? I think Hedy is a little bit insane. We kind of think, oh God, right, well, he's going to die because otherwise he'll let people know.
Just found out,
And we do assume he does die earlier in the film. And then I absolutely loved, one, that the cat also survived, because I thought the cat was dead for a minute. And dogs I can kind of deal with. I'm a cat person, but you kill a cat, that's it. I'm out. When it's kind of then revealed in the third act he's still alive and he comes to from the bathtub, which I thought was a kind of funny echo of Fatal Attraction. He absolutely saves the day. Like, he's very, very vital in giving Ali the upper hand to defeat Hedy. So for that to have been a queer character, he's not the most developed. He is a bit one-dimensional.
He is. He is. He's literally his role to be the gay best friend, and he doesn't appear to have, any relationships. Nothing shown on screen other than him being there to serve as her friend. But you are right. He does. We assume he's a goner, and he actually survives. So
I thought that was a clever twist. Like, I thought that was a nice way of doing it, and I actually didn't know that it was written by a queer guy. So that was I suppose that kind of maybe feeds into that. That's a nice way that's come through, maybe, perhaps. But again, it's context, isn't it? I think we were only really starting to see these characters be introduced on screen, and them not. I mean, it was literally they'd be flamboyant or the psycho killer. So he was kind of neither of those things. We find out his mum was incredibly butch, apparently, but that's about it. So.
Well, when we talk about that, I think it's quite funny that when you mentioned earlier that it does this like montage where it goes through like a lineup of all these possible candidates that are going to move in, and they're all like shockingly awful. If you go on IMDb, one of them is literally known as Mannish Applicant. And
is she the one who's like, we just need to tear down the walls, man?
And I would have moved her in because she's clearly got some DIY skills.
Exactly.
But I quite like how she's just kind of that's all she gets is Mannish Applicant.
That's going to be my new Twitter bio, I think. Just managed applicant. Yeah, okay. I love that. I mean, I think the funny thing is when you close the film and you realise that all of these applicants would have been a better fit than Hedy. That's kind of the comedy in it, isn't it, I suppose?
I like the horror angle with this. I was reading some stuff where the director was a massive fan of Rosemary's Baby. Like a huge fan. And the apartments in it are supposed to be a homage to Rosemary's Babies, and there's little moments in it. I'd loved them to have gone in a little bit more of a, I don't know, lean into that a little bit more and try and make us feel like something more f***ed up was going on, but it actually wasn't. I don't know. I do love this film, but I feel like I'd want to step it up a little bit.
I think out of all of them, this is probably the least violent one, maybe. Like, I mean, I know there is violence and there is the stiletto, but it's not very bloody, is it? It's not.
No, I think it's the shock value, isn't it? No, I know what you're saying. I think when it does happen, no, it is very much kind of it's a shocking moment because, and again, while we touch on sexual violence, it's Sam kind of is dark. He's half asleep. What we think is, Ali has come in the room and starts forming oral sex on him, only for him to then find, and there's that shocking moment where she looks up and it's not Ali, it's Hedy, and then and he's kind of starts throwing some threats her way, and then she takes him out with the stiletto heel. That there's an act of male rape there, against a man that it wouldn't have been perceived that way at the time, and so it does make Hedy far more sort of threatening to men in that scene. In any other part of the film, she's not. She's just kind of shown to be kind of a bit of a man hater. She doesn't like men. She certainly has a grudge against Sam, but that whole sequence with him when she kills him and performs that act against him, that's what really does make her a threat to men in the film.
I think what's interesting, obviously this film features sexual assault on both Ali with her boss at work, and then also obviously with Sam and Hedy coming into the hotel room. I do think I don't know if obviously this is how it was shot or how it was filmed, but I definitely feel you're made to feel a lot more uncomfortable when it's happening to Ali, and I don't know if that's obviously just something that we're used to seeing, because this film does stand out in the fact that it does also feature assault on a male. And again, I think at the time the attitudes towards that would be that, oh, it's not that bad.
I don't think it was written as... the way that it was written and the way it was directed, I feel like they wouldn't have seen it as assault.
No, it was kind of just like, and
I think that's why we as an audience don't really.
It's framed in that way, isn't it? Yeah. I do also find it interesting though that the men in the film who do either obviously commit assault or are a part of it, or have obviously we've found out had affairs, they are like the people who die and are punished ultimately. And obviously there is the ending with Hedy, but it is, I suppose the other films don't necessarily punish the men all that much. They are kind of seen as almost the people who can get away with stuff, whereas I think this film definitely goes there, which is interesting. It's
what I really like is the way that these characters, the things that they choose. So I'm thinking this and Fatal Attraction, all the violence and the things that they use against these men in acts of violence are all domesticated things that you can just find around the house, if that makes sense. Like the idea of women being chained to the kitchen. So let's, women being about high heels and sexiness and using those domestic female things around the house to be able to at least, whereas an ice pick you don't just have lying around,
No, unless you're really rich.
So with this and Fatal Attraction, that's what I really like, that there's these everyday, mundane, domestic things lying about your house, and those things being the acts used to get the violence in there. That's what I really like about it. I always find it scary when it's everyday household stuff that you can bump someone up with. Yeah.
Just a spray bottle of Sillet Bang.
Remember me? Barry Scott!
No, I don't think that would make a very iconic scene, would it? But I mean, the stiletto heel again, it does have a similarity there with the ice pick. Again, it's that phallic symbolism, but yet at the same time, it's also, iconically feminine, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And she is using kind of, what would be part of female sexuality, to take him out. So yeah, I think for me, she doesn't fit there is some characteristics there, but she doesn't classically fit the role of a femme fatale. But at the same time, I think it's an interesting film, and I think I am definitely on the side of, other people that you would love to know, did he intend this to be, have this sort of lesbian subtext, or is that coincidental?
I think, if it's okay, wrapping things up then on this one as well, I've got two questions I want to pose to you guys. I'll start with the serious one and then I'll end with the fun one.
Okay.
So I think, do you think then from a queer perspective, the fact that maybe as queer people, we probably have always lusted or maybe wanted someone that we can't have because maybe they don't identify the same as us, or there is that kind of wall built up, or I don't know, we're not fully there ourselves with things. Do you think that is kind of what this is commenting on? Obviously, we don't go as far as tying them up and taping them to an armchair in the middle of the living room, but I think
you might not.
Well, if it's consensual. All I'm saying is, do you think that's maybe what it was trying to address then? Do you think it was kind of saying you want something that you can't have, but she just goes that extra mile?
I mean, I read all these as men telling women how they need to act, and warning them, not only warning men against other women, but also keeping women singled apart from one another and being like, trust no one. That's how I see it. That's how I see these films, apart from maybe Gone Girl. I see them as ways of, it might not be the intention whatsoever, but the way that it just reads to me is just being like, look lads, all women are psychos, and look ladies, you can't trust any of these women with your men, so don't trust any of them. So what I love about them is when we do come into it, when queer people do come into it, we do disrupt the out of everything, and it shows that we're a force to be reckoned with. So
Amen to that. What about you, Zoe? Do you see it as commenting on that?
So I don't have a queer reading myself to look at her character and to look at the film, but what I do have is the perspective of, I think that Hedy is a universal type in a way of someone who is experiencing some sort of unrequited love, whether you want to see it as sisterly, familial, or romantic. And I think that is something that anyone can relate to and has experienced at some point, because I do think that Ali does give off, some mixed vibes in the film.
For sure.
And there was the one thing we haven't mentioned, which is pretty, I'll say briefly, is where Hedy is masturbating with the door wide open, clearly kind of inviting some sort of voyeurism, and Ali kind of doesn't entirely step away from that. So I do feel a little
only when she feels she's going to get caught does she step away.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
that is interesting.
So I do feel that for me, I can definitely identify with the idea of unrequited sort of feelings, because we've all experienced that at some point in our lives. All right, what was the fun question?
The final question then: if someone was living with you and then they came home and they copied your hairstyle, would you be that bothered?
I did have a similar experience, but not quite. I suddenly just thought about it, but wasn't quite living with them. But they were in my halls of residence at university. And,
that's where everything bad happens. So yeah.
I know, and it was the end of the 90s, and I was still in my goth days, and there was a girl who literally lived in the flat below. Like, she had a room in the bedroom was underneath mine, and she saw me in my goth get up, and apparently she knocks on every flat to try and find me. I feel now, looking back, I wasn't at all mean or cruel to her, but I felt a little bit freaked by her, and probably she was just looking to make friends. But I think I just found her a bit intense, because she started to dress more like me, and it was all very weird.
Oh my god, maybe she was listening through the vents. If she lived below you, maybe that's what was going on.
She had good taste in music. I should have been a bit more open. She had a good Depeche Mode sort of catalogue going on. So yeah,
that is creepy. I think that'd freak me out, maybe slightly, if I found that out.
I'd be fine with it, because one of my fantasies is to have sex with myself. So I could fulfill that. So
just for people at home, Zoe has just spat out her drink.
I think you need to watch that 1975 music video, don't you?
Somebody else.
Yeah, there you go.
He's already done it.
It's an interesting casting.
Really? I feel like that should be studied, Liam.
She should be studied down there. I don't understand it.
I just feel like it would be the ultimate way of being able to take
love
notes on yourself. No, not love myself. I don't care about that. The greatest way of knowing what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong.
Oh, so you're taking it from a technique standpoint then?
Yeah, but also, I mean, why not?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I think if many people could, they would. So I don't think you're that unique on that.
Yeah, and it's not even coming.
You not just install a mirror and be done with it.
It's not even coming from like a narcissistic side of things. It's like, it's just literally, I want to know what I'm doing right and what like needs to be improved. I don't want to know who was lying and who wasn't.
Oh my god! Wow. Okay. Well, moving on. We come to the final film of the discussion then. So this is going to be 2014's Gone Girl, directed by the incomparable David Fincher. If you can't tell, I do love this man and I love his work. This is described as a thriller mystery, and it stars Rosamund Pike as Amy Dunn and Ben Affleck as Nick Dunn, her husband. We also get Neil Patrick Harris, who is an out and proud gay actor. Liam's pulling a face, so I'm sure we'll get into that in just a moment. This is another film based on a book. I haven't read the whole book, but I've read parts of the book, and I will say I enjoyed very much what I read. It's written by Gillian Flynn, and she wrote both the book and then the screenplay. So I think there's a unique kind of thread being pulled through on that one, which is nice. Ultimately, this is a film about Amy, who goes missing, and as is always with these sorts of cases, the media and society believes that Nick is involved and has murdered her, because it's usually the husband. And it takes that clever approach of what we expect to be happening, and then pulling the rug out at the last minute and revealing the fact that this has actually all been something that Amy has conspired to do from the start. She's very, very thorough in her plans, and then pretty much turns into Basic Instinct at the end. So I mean, it's an incredible film. I like crime thrillers and dramas anyway. I think the performances were incredible in this, and this again is very much more of a modern retelling, I think, of this Femme Fatale character. So did you guys watch this film then when this came out? Because obviously I think we were all probably going to the cinema and watching films like nutters at this point anyway.
I bought completely into the hype around this film when it came out. There was so many people talking about it, and I was like, oh, it's got to be good. And I'm a huge Ben Affleck fan, but I'm a huge Rosamund Pike fan. And I was like, okay, I'll have to watch it. And I remember leaving the cinema. I went to see it on my own, and then went straight into the foyer and booked in another viewing of it. I wanted to, once that reveal was there, I wanted to then watch the film again. And I was like, I've got nothing on today, so I'll do that. So there's not many films that I've done that with, but this is one of them. Really enjoy it. In fact, I want to watch it again tonight. I only watched it last night.
It is an investment, though, isn't it? It's quite a lengthy film, as is usually the case with Fincher. What about you, Zoe? When did you watch this?
So I think that I read the book first, which I have to admit, I'm sometimes, being more a filmy person, I generally do things backwards and watch the film first, then the book. But I think the book was a huge hit. I think it was a huge success, and it was one of those books that was talked about. So I think I did read the book first. And, Gillian Flynn then did the screenplay adaptation, and I knew that David Fincher was going to direct it, and being a huge fan of his work, knowing that, you know, one thing that David Fincher is able to do is take books, adaptations, you know, of from other things and turn it into his own kind of work, put his own spin on it. So I was excited to see where it would go with him directing it. I think what I enjoyed about the story originally was the fact that some of the other films we've discussed tend to sort of weigh towards, you know, one point of view. And what I find interesting about this film is that kind of you get to find out different characters' motivations, and it really is cleverly designed to push and pull the audience around. So at times you have empathy for Nick's character, and then other times you can, although you might not want to quite go to the lengths that Amy does, you have some understanding of, you know, and some insight into her psyche as well. So I do find that is one of the great strengths of the story. And as I said earlier, I think that, you know, Amy represents a new kind of femme fatale, which is they've always been there to, you know, make some commentary about gender, but I feel like she's definitely a response to a new kind of patriarchy, which is all about, you know, Amy's character is trying to live up to the expectations of men. She's created this persona for herself, which is meant to be kind of engaging with the terms set out by men. So I find that quite interesting.
I think as well the fact that she's kind of even in childhood had this level of expectation, because we find out in the story that she was actually a character of children's books called Amazing Amy. So she was always held up, even by her parents and her father in particular, to be this incredibly able individual. And I mean, that is kind of then that bleeds into her adult life as well, and the expectations of her there. I think it's an incredibly clever story, and it definitely plays on, obviously what kind of it means to be a woman in society these days. I think the queer perspective on this is, I do think that there is a queer lens to it, that it's maybe a queer perspective on modern marital relationships and maybe how toxic they are. I mean, if we think about obviously the time, equality and marriage equality in particular, it was still something that was very much in the forefront of a lot of people's minds. Queer people couldn't get married everywhere, and obviously things did change, which is great, but it was still this institution of marriage was seen as this sacred thing, and then this was almost like it threw back the curtain and went, do you know what, these people are suffering with unemployment problems, baby issues, financial strain, and these people who are supposed to be in this magnificent institution, they absolutely hate each other, and literally look at the lengths that they'll go to try and get out of this institution.
All the films we've looked at today is, and this one in particular, it's kind of like shoving that battle against like unattainable perfection. That society leads us to believe that that's what marriage is, and that's what having this nuclear family is. It's a pinnacle of perfection that everyone needs to strive for. But this film in particular really strips that back, shows you that the goal that's put on to all of us is not something that's, it can be attainable, but it's not the perfection that we were promised at all, and it's not for everyone. I'm not hugely well versed on Fincher's work. Well, I never thought I was until I realised I've probably watched every single music video he's directed. Because you know, he's directed a lot of queer iconic music videos.
Exactly, absolutely.
But
Madonna videos.
It was. So I've never been a huge, like, controversial. I've never been a huge Fight Club fan, but not to say I don't think it's a good film. It's because there's always been there's a certain group of fans of Fight Club that I don't want to be associated with. But then after watching this, I then went back on that, and then I really like the way that Fincher, like, the audience that attached to Fight Club, but not the audience that was meant for it. It's supposed to be like, you do realise that you're adding to this problem of hypermasculinity and all this.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned this, because we studied Fight Club, didn't we, at college, with film studies, and it was exactly that kind of thing about this notion of masculinity and all of that. So it's funny you picked up on that, because that was like I'm sure, was that for our exam that we did that? Was Fight Club for our exam?
It was. Yeah. I didn't just do it for fun, you know.
Shade. Oh, well, I know, but I'm trying to
remember. Got your A star for Liam.
Thanks for that, Zoe. Did you hear that, folks? I got an A star. So.
Yeah, I think. I mean, what is a consistent theme throughout Fincher's work is cynicism, and this is what this film has. Is that, and I really was interested in the points you've just made about. Looking at this film and the institution of marriage through a queer lens, because absolutely, you know, what I love in this film is when we get Amy's point of view, because so far you felt a little bit of empathy for Nick that you know he's trapped in this sort of now loveless marriage. But when we get hers and she goes through the whole monologue about being the cool girl, well, as you've already mentioned about her childhood and Amazing Amy, that her whole life's been constructed. She doesn't seem to have a core personality, and you know she goes through this bitter monologue about conforming to what men want, and you know there's even a bit in there of staying skinny, burping, laughing at kind of rude jokes, and then she even talks about waxing her, you know, bits red raw, you know, and then basically kind of says and then only to find that you're cast aside and that you're replaced with a newer, bouncier, younger cool girl. And the cool girl, the whole point of the cool girl was that women are not meant to complain. That's part of the male fantasy. And then she's gone to all these lengths for him. She's moved across the country. She's bought him this bar from her trust fund. And you know he's started this extramarital affair with one of his students, Nick's character, and then there comes the revenge, because she's gonna kind of get her own back on him. She's gonna teach him a lesson for rejecting her efforts and her devotion. You know, I think, like you said, it kind of demonstrates in a way that, you know, people give their all and it's still not enough. And I think you can see that she's a psychopath, but you can kind of, there's a little bit there you can relate to.
One thing I love about Gone Girl is I feel like to me it came out at the wrong time. I feel like to me it would have a bit more of an impact now, purely because true crime, like people, like enthusiasts are like, it's like a huge cult following now. People are obsessed with these true crime things, and this really dissects the way that we latch onto these real life tragic stories, and really questions the sympathy that we have with them, and whether it can actually be real sympathy without it being like politicized, or whether it's like a cult mentality of who are we actually sympathizing with. There was an article that I read in the New Yorker that spoke about this, and it says it's whether we can actually feel real sympathy without a media enabled cult of victimhood. Yeah, and it speaks a lot about that. It's a great article, and it also it spoke about this film in a way that I'd never really looked at it before, and called it a modern Gothic. And then thinking of like your classic Gothic tales like Wuthering Heights, etc., like that. But they describe it as a modern gender politics and Gothic fear mixed together, which really like the idea of, you were talking about like the female victimhood. Like that. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. If you want it, it's by Joshua Rothman, and it was released October 8, 2014. And it's an article called What Gone Girl is Really About. It's great because it makes a lot. It does do the whole comparison between this and Fight Club, but it's really, it goes into those Gothic archetypes that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't have necessarily picked up on that, but then hearing you say that, it does fit into that in some ways. I think as well, linking into that and about the media, I think Missy Pyle plays a character called Ellen Abbott, and she's the man-hating reporter, and I think she's a really interesting character in this film. Particularly, there's like a lot of these films have kind of like this mirrored quality to them, like they start a certain way and then they end with almost the same sort of thing happening. Obviously, we've got the ice-picking Basic Instinct, we've got the shot literally in this film at the start with Rosamund Pike looking up, and then then looking up at the end, and the way the audience feels at the start and the finish are completely different. And I think it's funny that she is a physical representation of that, because she hates Ben Affleck's character. He's definitely the murderer, and then she comes to his house at the end and brings him a gift and is like, I'm so sorry, sort of thing. It is kind of weird. We do live in a society, particularly, you know, like with the likes of like Black Mirror and stuff coming out as well, like this public almost mob mentality, like ultimately kind of seems to decide now who's guilty. And of course we've had movements coming in, and I think you're right in terms of timing. A lot has kind of come out, particularly in Hollywood, about sexual abuse and violence, and women in particular coming forward about that.
Look at the whole Johnny Depp case. We've had everybody lauding this just because he's a successful actor who people like in many roles. That whole culture that was created, the memes that were coming out of this horrendous like case, and just
I found the whole thing quite disgusting, to be honest.
And I feel like once you watch, if you were to watch this film, it kind of like the great commentary on it is the way that we look at these things like as a society. I hate using the terms. It's like, but the way that but like the media frenzy that stuff like this creates. But yeah, the whole, I feel like watching this with the context of what's just happened with the whole Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, just the sensationalism and the way that these people are no longer, even though I was speaking about, we do have sympathy for them. It's fake sympathy. It's complete fake sympathy. If you felt sympathy, you wouldn't be creating funny memes and TikToks about this horrendous situation. Yeah, I
think what's problematic about the film is that when the book came out and the film, I think the author Gillian Flynn got quite a lot of backlash, especially from women, essentially saying you've pushed back feminism, and she was like, oh my god, you know, what have I done? I didn't realise I'd done that. I thought what I was creating was, you know, a story that shows that characters and people are not black and white, and anyone could be a villain. And I think in that sense the film is, as I mentioned before, is very complex, and you see kind of that there are no binary opposites in this film. They're all a little bit guilty in different ways.
It's very grey, isn't it? Very muddy.
It is. But what's problematic is that, for me, is that you find out, you know, that Nick's had this affair, and it's not just been a one-off, it's been 15 months. And essentially she feels like she's been, you know, reduced down to nothing. She's moved away from her family. She's left her career behind. They've moved back to, you know, is it Michigan? But, you know, Western states, and she's given her everything to him, and he's she's been disregarded. But it kind of starts to give you the sympathy that obviously she goes to extreme lengths, but you can kind of see why she feels like you know, she has been rejected. He's found a younger, bouncier version of her. But then it kind of does something else by introducing, and again, this is a little bit of the gothic thing coming in, that actually there's a back history, and that there is another man that she has stitched up for rape. And then we see her go through this whole situation where she claims to Desi, who's come to her rescue, which I would like to talk about in a minute. It's a separate thing. That she's been abused by Nick, so he comes to save her. And then when she decides that Nick has repented enough on television that she'll go back, she then turns Desi into this abuser who's kidnapped her. And sexually assaulted her repeatedly. That, you know, it kind of reinforces it in kind of the sort of public psyche that women kind of frequently sort of report rape falsely, and it actually, you know, it is very, very small numbers that, you know, that's actually the case. So I think it is damaging in that sense, that it kind of shows that women use this power to report falsely on sexual assault, and it suggests that, oh, actually, she's got a track record for doing this.
I think that's definitely where the damage exists. I think it's empowering in the way that she is this strong and incredibly intelligent and resourceful character. I mean, yeah, I think I read somewhere someone described her as a beautiful psychopath, and I do see that because it is so beautiful. It's like artistry, the way that she acts in this film. But I think, again, it links back to what we said about those societal like roles, like the fact that she does do all of this for her spouse, and then that's almost then what pushes him away, because he can't accept that he's not been able to do that himself, leads her then into obviously this kind of this tale. But then the damage comes when we then lean into the fact that she's using her power as a woman in an incredibly controversial way. I mean, it's not to say that it doesn't happen, but like you said, I think this kind of film blows it out of proportion and makes it seem like much more of an issue than it is, when the real issue is people aren't talking about it and aren't actually getting the help and services that they need, you know, to like deal with this sort of stuff. And I suppose it kind of pushes people back into the dark with it. It almost kind of says, well, maybe you shouldn't talk about it.
I think it kind of, you know, for me, it definitely kind of exaggerates this notion of power that women have over men, which in real life is not true. Having said that, I do think that the whole kind of section of the film with Desi's character is interesting. I'm keen to hear what you think of his character, but you know, essentially Desi is like this high school sweetheart who's never got over her, and they've maintained this pen pal sort of friendship over the years, and he comes to her rescue. And you know, I think it's quite cleverly played out, because obviously he meets a bit of a sticky end, and you realise he's been totally manipulated by her. But I think again, Desi's character reflects some sort of patriarchy, because you know, what he's doing is appearing, he's white knighting, isn't he? But
he's the nice guy.
Well, he thinks he's the nice guy, but he sets his demands very quickly. You know, because she's transformed herself into this dowdy version of who she is, to try and not be recognised when she's basically you know, faked her disappearance. And he set up this you know, pool house for her, this lake house for her to hide in. In the book, it becomes apparent that he's been preparing it for a long time, even before this came out. So you know, he's been much more calculated himself than it appears in the film. But you know, he comes in, he's brought hair dye for her, tweezers, he's told her to go to the gym. There's a bit where she's stuffing herself eating ice cream while they're watching Nick's TV interview, and he takes it away from her. So it's quite clear that he is and he says, you know, you've come to me, I've waited all these years, you know, so now basically you need to give yourself to me. So there's a real sense of entitlement with his character, and he's quite controlling, but it's done in that, you know, I'm your rescuer, white knight sort of way. So you again, you know, now things like coercive control have become recognised as an offence, but you know, back then it wouldn't have been. But Desi's character, you know, represents a whole different set of problems, I think.
I don't think he's on the same level as Amy, obviously, in terms of being a psycho, but I think he's like one lick away from being kind of a big problem. Like, she would be in trouble if she wasn't as resourceful or intelligent as she is.
And literally, like, speak to, like, we all have this thing against, you know, those guys who they're the nice guy, quote unquote, so that with that you have to, like, the idea of friend zoning and all that bullshit, that he represents that idea that I absolutely detest. I hate people who, I've been nice to you, so because of that you have to reward me with what I want. And it's just it's a subsect of men who I wish were eradicated from this earth. Because
I don't know if this term exists in the queer community, but apparently the term being bandied about is a soft boy. They basically want to kind of, you know, project themselves as I'm a nice guy and the rest of it, but then, you know, there is an expectation there that they have this entitlement.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we can't talk about this character without also then talking about his incredible demise. And I think very much so, Basic Instinct probably ran in its own way, but this one went absolutely balls to the wall crazy with that notion of sex and death in one scene. I can remember seeing this at the cinema, and just because I hadn't read the book, so I didn't know what was coming, and I can just remember just gasping and just
cheered.
It's like, it reminds me of a scene out of Hostel 2. It's
with the
like
bathtub.
It's brutal.
I mean, it's incredibly well done, and I mean the way that the music goes, again, the score is paramount, I think, to this. Gorgeous. And the shot kind of fades in and out, and you've kind of got like this almost, I suppose, this frenzied view of the scene, like how you'd feel if you were maybe a part of it. It certainly felt like, my perspective of it is maybe that's how he felt in that moment, like his consciousness is dipping in and out, and like he's seeing flashes of her straddling him and getting off him and everything. And I mean, it's nothing short of, I think, iconic, the whole thing. I absolutely loved it, and I already loved the film, I think, up until this point, but then that just cemented it for me. I was like, this is incredible.
The transformation scenes in this for me were the iconic bit, when she's like cutting her hair and stuff like that. It's just oh my god, it's just a testament to what a powerhouse performer Rosamund Pike is.
She is incredible in this.
The way she can act with just her eyes alone is something to be studied, I think. She's absolutely phenomenal. I would love to see her take some more roles, like some meaty roles.
I haven't seen her in anything since then like that. But I tell a lie. Before that, she did play a Bond girl, didn't she? And she was kind of,
and again, iconic, getting stabbed through the Bible in the heart. I was just like, yes.
I've forgotten that's how she went. She's like a classic Hitchcockian ice blonde, isn't she?
Yeah. Absolutely. If you want to watch I Care a Lot.
I was just about to say, if you want to watch a great film with Rosamund Pike, I Care a Lot. Diane Waist. It just so good. It's incredible.
It's a really, really good film. But I mean, to be fair, I'd watch anything with her in.
So there are a couple that we haven't mentioned today that I just want to throw out there if anybody likes the sound of them. There's a really great, it's so bad it's good film where they take the idea of the femme fatale and it's camp as well. It's called A Simple Favor. And
yes, Blake Lively,
Anna Kendrick.
Anna Kendrick. Don't like Anna Kendrick.
It's not.
I have seen that.
It's Paul Feig, isn't it?
But the best thing about it is Blake Lively's wardrobe, and that's. The wardrobe itself is femme fatale on its own, just for how it is. So,
Speaking of the C-bomb, I will go back to Gone Girl. This makes incredible use of the C-bomb towards the end.
It does.
And I do love a good C-bomb in a film. Absolutely, I do.
I feel like this film, you can really feel like there was some input in there that wasn't all man. I feel like that's watching the other three films that we've discussed today, there is that sense of everything's happening and a bloke's done this. Obviously David Fincher is also a man, but you can feel that there was some input there that wasn't completely masculine, and it was really nice. It approached it in a way that felt realized. It felt like it was talked about. It felt like a lived in world, and there was perspectives in there that weren't just.
Well, I think two characters we haven't spoken about, some of the supporting characters, so Rhonda Boney, who plays Kim Dickens, the lead investigator, and although she's very, very thorough, she doesn't jump to the conclusion that Nick's guilty. And then, in the latter part of the film, before even Nick kind of, confirms it to her, she's very suspect, and she kind of can see through what's going on, but they know they can't prove it. Interestingly enough, Kim Dickens again is she's gay in real life, and there's a couple of scenes in the film where I think there's one where she's even trying to get Nick to open up, and she mentions, I have those issues with my partner, and I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity there. Like they could have brought in more of a queer angle, but again, like you said, back in 2014, maybe that they just didn't think that they could go there. Margot, who plays his twin sister, Nick's sister as well, is 100% supportive and on his side throughout the film, and makes it clear that she doesn't like Amy. So there isn't really any female solidarity as such, other than the very sort of vacuous fake TV presenters and the neighbour that's shown to be very stupid and naive, that Amy's manipulated into this false friendship so that she can extract urine to get a fake pregnancy test positive and to also build this fake life about her being kind of abused by Nick. So I think they complicate things and make it more interesting. I also really like Tyler Perry as Tanner Bolt, as the attorney who's basically going to coach Nick how to get out of this, because he's a bit useless at representing himself, isn't he? And they're like, look, you look smug, you don't look that worried. And I think Tyler Perry's great in that film.
I want to shout out Missy Pyle, because Missy Pyle is a gay icon, and she's one of the best parts of Galaxy Quest. Well, everyone's the best part of Galaxy Quest.
I was going to say just Galaxy Quest. Yeah.
And as Veruca's mum, not Veruca's mum, Violet's mum, Charlie Factory. She's just a gay icon and all of it, and she has a connection. She's also in Soul Plane. She's in some of the greatest shittest films ever, and I love her so much. I've really enjoyed going through these films today. As I said, it tiptoes the line with what traditional horror, I suppose, good people would expect. I feel like it firmly belongs in our community, and it's great to be able to talk about them because I am very rarely that serious, so I will just shout about these women and just say they're gay icons, every single one of them. But what I really love about these characters is the way that people haven't latched onto them, because they're ultimately, just like queer people, they are the other. In every story they are the other, and they're the ones who we really connect to in these stories.
The ones we root for sure. Yeah.
Ultimately, the last thing I would say about Gone Girl is that, and this is where for me she is like a Femme Fatale 2.0, is that ultimately it's Nick's transgressions that are punished, because she comes back as faked this sort of kidnap, and now then ends up, we haven't mentioned this, but she gets pregnant through artificial insemination, because they'd tried to go through like a fertility clinic earlier, and she essentially traps him. And what you
he's
get
now being trapped into the institution that they've been escaping in the previous films.
You get this sense that really at the end of the film it's Nick's transgressions that are going to be punished, because he's the one that's got to stick it out, and that Amy not only gets away with it, but she gains fame, the adoration of millions, and gets the nuclear family happy ending. And I just think that's, that is definitely an involvement of the Femme Fatale narrative.
For sure. I've had an absolute whale of a time talking about these films, but as is always, I suppose, with these episodes, I think it's time we maybe talk about some of our recommendations for the month and some of the other cool bits of media or what have you that we've been checking out so far. So as our guest, Zoe, I don't know if you want to kick things off and maybe put the ball in your court. I know you were speaking about one I know Liam is going to love for a fact. So
Liam might have more to say about it, but last few days I've been watching the Netflix series Sandman, and I've quite enjoyed that. I was saying to you, it's a little bit bonkers all over the place, and some episodes feel almost like a bit Twin Peaks style, and then some of it feels a bit Stranger Things. I haven't read any of the comics, but I've quite enjoyed it, and there's some interesting characters, and in particular kind of they're playing different demons and stuff. The character of Desire is quite an interesting non-binary performer, so worth watching. Give it a go.
Neil Gaiman's like my hero, and Sandman comics are like my favourite thing in the world, apart from my cat. The Sandman comics are like my favourite thing in the world.
Seller Sandman comics. Okay, cool.
But honestly, I'm really happy with the adaptation. It's incredible. And you talking about Desire, Mason Alexander Parker's Desire is casting genius. Actually, the cast, the whole show is casting genius. A quick Gone Girl throwback, Boyd Holdenbrook plays the Corinthian in it. And I never fancied him in the comics, and I do now in real life. But God,
what, even with your teeth?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Wow.
So I've got 2 recommendations this month. They are kind of like queering the Femme Fatale in a way. So the first one's a book called Yes Daddy by Jonathan Parks Ramage. And it's like a sugar daddy situation gone terribly, horribly wrong.
Oh, okay.
And the next one is Bathhouse by PJ Vernon, which was sold to me as the gay Fatal Attraction. And it's fucking sick. Bathhouse by PJ Vernon and Yes Daddy by Jonathan Parks Ramage. Yeah, just incredible books. And I'm not really much of like a thriller person. I mainly read horror, but they were like insanely good. Like,
they did it for you.
Looking at my Goodreads, I consumed them both within a day. I literally couldn't put them down.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, amazing. Okay, I'm sure we've spoken about Bathhouse before, and I think I need to get myself a copy
Absolutely.
ordered.
Yeah.
I've got 2 recommendations this month. One of them, I mean, we've kind of spoken about this, but I actually finished watching last night They/Them, the slasher film from Blumhouse, which is set at a queer conversion camp. It's not necessarily a recommendation from me because I think it's been divisive, but have either of you seen it? I know you have, Liam. I don't know if you've checked it out yet.
It rings a bell. I haven't seen it.
Well, we've got Kevin Bacon going back to a summer camp with a slasher film. But the problem is it's not necessarily a slasher film.
It doesn't know what genre it wants to be, and it can't get its tone right.
I didn't hate it though. I'm going to say that. Like, I actually did enjoy it. I think it should have been a bit more in the horror genre, and that would have been a lot better.
One thing I appreciate that's coming out about it is they cast queer actors in queer roles. And the conversation that the cast are having, they've teamed up with a charity to talk about the real dangers and horrors of conversion therapy against LGBT plus people. So that's nice. It's a really lovely campaign that the cast are doing. But yeah, my recommendation is watch something else.
Fair enough. I think my main thing, I mean, again, a similar sort of thing to that, there is a show on Netflix as well called Uncoupled, which I've binged this week, which is by the guy who wrote Sex and the City. Again, it does star Neil Patrick Harris, so I'm not too sure whether you'll enjoy it, Liam. But I will say it's kind of... It was alright. It was a bit annoying in places, but again, it was kind of refreshing to see a show like that on a platform like that. And it is basically a gay Sex and the City, as far as I'm aware. The thing, though, that I implore people to watch is a show called The First Lady. And again, I've watched this the whole way through this last week or so. So we've got Viola Davis as Michelle Obama, Michelle Pfeiffer as Betty Ford, and Gillian Anderson as Eleanor Roosevelt.
What a cast!
It tells the story of the first ladies, obviously, of America. And although they're set decades apart, there's a synergy to all these stories. They're going through similar sorts of things. And surprisingly, I didn't know this. Obviously, I'm not too brushed up on my American history. There is a queer storyline very much at the heart of one of these first ladies. So I can't fault it. I've absolutely thought it was riveting. It's such a great TV show. So definitely check that out. And also, we love strong women on this podcast, so there we go.
And those three actresses are some
if this doesn't get nominated, if it doesn't get nominated, I'm gonna absolutely riot. Give them the Emmys, please. It's it's an incredible show. Have you seen it, Zoe, or have you not?
No, I haven't. But no, you've sold it to me, and I think it would be nice to see Michelle Pfeiffer have a bit of a revival.
Yes, she is incredible in this. She's so good. Yeah, her Betty Ford is something else. Also, not totally hated American Horror Stories so far. I know our last episode covered American Horror Stories. I think the first 2 episodes were really good. It's kind of gone a little bit downhill since then, but
I still haven't watched any of this season.
I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, particularly the first episode.
I just needed a breather.
Needed a break. Absolutely. But moving on then, as we always do, from one horror story to another, it's the time that you've been looking forward to, Zoe. It's the real life horror hookup story.
I'm not sure what to expect. I'm bracing myself, but yeah.
I'm hoping we don't get too many bodily fluids on this one, because that seems to be a running theme. So yeah, make sure that you don't eat anything before Liam starts. It's all I'll say.
Hi boys. I'm going to first apologise for two things. One, for being straight. I wish I could change that. Two, for what you're about to read.
Oh no.
Recently divorced and loving life, I decided to dip my toe back into the dating pool. I joined Tinder because that's what everyone else was doing at the time and thought, what's the worst that can happen? I wade through a cesspit of men holding fish, awful bios and cheesy chat-up lines, when in comes Rodrigo, 27, tall, dark and handsome, and a killer smile. Now, I don't usually go for a younger man, but this was a fresh start for me and I needed some vitality in my life. We agreed to meet up for some drinks at a local bar and we hit it off straight away. He is charming, he is flirty, and he has an arse that you could bounce pennies off. I'm feeling the best I have in years, stuck in a loveless, sexless marriage, and a bottle of tequila helped. So I invite him back to my place. It was full of fiery European passion. We are at it as soon as we come through the door. We barely make it to the bedroom when he picks me up and throws me onto the bed. Big mistake. Huge.
Oh no.
There's a horrible screech. And from under the duvet crawls my adorable Bengal cat, Isis.
Oh no.
No.
I landed right on top of her. Isis comes out limping. I start crying and I don't know how to react. It's a mixture of hormones, divorce, and tequila. I ask Rodrigo to leave. He leaves. The next day I take my cat to the vet and it turns out she had a broken leg. Every time my cat looked at me from her cone of shame and her bandage, I felt guilty. I deleted Tinder straight away. I've not been on since.
So
That's it, short but sweet.
Can we coin the phrase cat cruncher instead of bunny boiler? Is that
cat
take
sitting?
Cat sitting.
Yeah,
that takes it to a whole new level.
It's so they were. Don't mind showing this because I haven't said who they are, but this is an ex-colleague of mine, and she told me about this when we were at work, and I was absolutely pissing myself. So I reached out to her. I reached out to her. I was like, I'm doing like a Femme Fatale episode, and I really want because like her story is a bit like cougarish and all that. And I was like, I really want your story. I was like, would you mind writing some stuff down for me?
She literally is a fatal woman to that poor cat.
And I was like, I'll make sure no one will know it's you. I was like, but it's such a good story. And she has such a knack of telling stories. I was like, I need it in your words.
You need to write it, yeah. Thank you.
Rodrigo threw her onto the bed, but straight onto her couch.
My God.
So
Rodrigo,
I will allow a straight story on here, because I really enjoy that one. Poor Isis.
Is Isis okay though now? Has Isis made a full recovery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Isis is cool now. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. As long as the cat's okay, like I said.
Imagine that's how you get woken up as a cat, though. Yeah, having a lovely nap, and then all of a sudden you've got
just get body slammed by your owner.
Oh, I wonder how Rodrigo's doing. I wonder if he ever felt guilty for it. He should do.
He's probably opened a cat sanctuary somewhere. I imagine that's
Rodrigo, if you're listening out there, I expect a donation made to Catch Protection in your name.
Yeah. Incredible.
But if you liked hearing that, you can submit your own hookup horror stories. You can email us at theirqueerpodcast@outlook.com. Or you can DM us on social media. If you find me and DM me, that's where most of the submissions are sitting in my inboxes. There's some good ones out there I can't wait to share with the world. But yeah, I always want more. And plus it's nice to read when I'm sat at home sometimes. And I just fancy
giggling to yourself.
Yeah. And also make sure you include whether you want it anonymous or not, because that's a big thing that some people haven't been doing. And I've had some
chase up. Yeah, we need consent, guys. But no, thank you. That was although it was harrowing, that was a pretty tame one, I will say. So I imagine we're going to get a disgusting one again next month. But thank you for an awesome episode, guys. Thank you so much, Zoe, as well for joining us today. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed chatting about stuff. It's been incredible. It's been really good.
I've really enjoyed it, and I'd love to come back sometime, especially if you do decide you are doing the Lost Boys properly.
I think, honestly, at this point, I think we're going to have about 18 people on the podcast episode of the Lost Boys. So many people love it. Well, talking of, I must say, so this last month has been incredible for myself personally.
Shut up.
I went to London and went to Lost Boys Pizza, which, if you've not been, Zoe, is incredible.
I saw that you'd gone there, and I was thinking, is it just a coincidence, or is it actually got a link to the film?
Oh yeah, it's linked to the film.
I bought these today.
What's that?
What?
They're just little pens, but they're cute.
What is it about then?
So you go, and it's just basically Lost Boys themed, like inside. The pizzas are charcoal black as well, and they cut them like pentagrams, which is everything. So I went on a Wednesday, and this is a tip for any of the listeners, not sponsored, but if you go on a Wednesday, they release a password on Instagram, and if you whisper that to the waiter or waitress, you get 2 for 1 on your pizzas and happy hour cocktails all night.
You might have said that this isn't sponsored, but Lost Boys Pizza, if you are listening.
Yeah, if you are listening, please sponsor us, because it was incredible.
Or just invite me down.
Well, it was just coincidence, because it was just around the corner from our hotel. Like, it was literally 10-minute walk away. So I was like, do you know what? I need to get on that Zavi pre-order thing for the special edition they're releasing of Lost Boys. Oh yeah, there's a nice box set coming out.
The postcards and stuff inside, which I need. Oh god, I love Lost Boys.
Another thing though, I met Charity Shop Sue at Pride, and she bought me a drink. She bought me a shot.
Oh, that's nice.
So I you were invited, Liam. You should have been there, but it was incredible. It was incredible.
I get the sense that you're rubbing his nose in it.
I definitely am. I definitely am.
Well,
she's an icon.
Sounds awful.
She's my femme fatale.
I'm almost prided out, because my job means I have to go to quite a few prides, and it's not a bad thing, but like I'm so tired in the moment.
It's almost done. It's almost over.
Almost done. Just one more pride that I've got to go and work. It's all good.
Is that it? Is that all you've got left now?
Derby Pride's the next one I've got to work, and then I don't have any more prides this year. Derby Pride, if anyone's listening, 10th September, Marketing Park.
There you go. Details. But yes, thank you so much, Zoe, for joining us.
Yeah,
I just wanted to gloat for a moment in the public eye. But we definitely need to get you back at some point.
Absolutely.
I would love to come back.
Yes, thank you. I'm very, very excited for next month's episode as well. Next month is Bisexual Visibility Month, isn't it?
So. It is. It's a month just for the bisexuals, and we would be complete fools not to be able to tap into that and discuss the film that made most people of this generation bisexual. And that is The Mummy and The Mummy Returns.
Oh, we're gonna go there. We're gonna go with The Mummy Returns.
Because that made me question whether I was 100% a homo or not.
An Axe on a Moon, that whole... okay.
Yeah, we'll get into it. But yeah, we'll be discussing The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. We won't be discussing the Dragon Prince Emperor thing, because no Rachel Weisz.
No.
But a sexy Alex though. Okay, right. Anyway, but yeah, we'll be discussing those two films because they are incredible. Brendan Fraser deserves the world. Yeah, we'll be discussing that. So for all the B's and the P's out there, I suppose this one's going to be for you. If you've enjoyed our episode today, I have created an amazing Femme Fatale playlist for you all listen to. It's some of my favourite songs and artists from the 90s that are all like...
It's so
We're talking, there's Portishead on there, there's some Bjork, there's some PJ Harvey on there, there's some Tori Amos. Just incredible songs to get you in the mood to seduce and kill a man. So
I don't think we need to say anything else, really, do we? That's sold itself. Sold itself. So thank you again for listening, as always, guys, and I'm going to leave it with Zoe to sign us out for this episode.
So until next time, remember that closets were not made for people, they were made for monsters and babysitter killers.
Yay!
Goodbye! Nailed it in one.
Bye.
Well done.
the real Femme Fatale right there.
You've been listening to a podcast on the Super Freak Media Podcast Network. To show your support, be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And you can find us on social media in the links in the description of this episode. Thank you for listening.